This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the bottom feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
And welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In the second part, I'm going to talk to Terry Arko about ways to prevent algae, since sodium bromide is becoming less and less available, and it was one of the primary ways to prevent algae in pools for a lot of people in the industry. We're going to talk about some proactive ways to prevent algae in the pool, and you may be surprised a little bit by Terry's answer, and I think it definitely makes a lot of sense what he says here, and it does kind of sound a lot like what Bob Lowry would say on the podcast as well. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. So now that one of our tools has been removed from the industry, because most of the pool guys in my area would have a 25-pound bucket of it in the back of their truck, because it's highly effective, that. So algae, what would be some effective ways to treat it now that you don't have that product?
Well, and I mean, it's kind of interesting we're having this conversation because I'm getting ready to do one of my classes I'm doing tomorrow is on algae. And I don't know if it's a new approach. I don't think it's a new approach. I think it's really an old approach. And this is going to sound, I hope it doesn't sound flippant or too simple, but I'm going to say chlorine. Chlorine is still the best algicide. And so let me explain that a little more when I say chlorine as the best algicide. I'm talking about free chlorine and maintaining a proper level of free chlorine. And this is, if anybody's taken Bob's classes, like the pool chemistry for residential pool class, in that class and in the book, it goes through, there's a whole section in there about where your free chlorine residual, and in particular, specifically, where your hypochlorous acid levels need to be in order to kill algae. And so I think the most important and probably the best practice that you can do, if it's at all possible, and it is a challenge, is there's a couple things here. One is, and I'm teaching this now, and it's kind of a breakthrough, I think, but is when you're testing. So there's 3 things when you go to a pool, every week, however often you're at that pool, there's 3 things you want to know every time you're there. You want to know what the total chlorine is, you want to know what the free chlorine is, and then you want to determine what your combined chlorine is. You always want to know those 3 things. So you want to test total, you want to test free every time you're there. And when you know what your total and you know what your free is, you're going to subtract your free chlorine from your total to determine what your combined chlorine is. When I say combined chlorine, I mean chloramines and those things that are very poor disinfectants, and they interfere with the disinfection process, and they interfere with the process of algae being killed by the free chlorine. What I state for algae control using chlorine is if you maintain your free chlorine, if you ensure that your free chlorine residual is always higher than your combines, you most likely, I'm not going to guarantee it absolutely because there could be other things in play, but I'm going to say you won't have algae in that pool. Now, we won't get into talking about cyanuric acid and all that kind of stuff. That's a whole nother subject we know about, but Um, I'm saying that if you are maintaining a residual of free chlorine that's higher, and I usually say if you can keep your free chlorine residual 10 times higher than what your combines are, as long as your combines aren't through the roof, let's say you have 0.2 ppm combined, 0.4 ppm of combined. Okay, well, if you go 10 times from that, that's 2 ppm of free or 4 ppm of free, where you want to keep your free chlorine residual. So that's one thing. The other thing that Bob states is we know that hypochlorous acid is the killing agent of chlorine, right? That's the 99% killer, killing algae. And Bob states that in order to effectively kill algae and prevent algae, you have to ensure that you're going to produce 0.5 ppm of HOCl from the chlorine you're adding. And so that's another thing where you need to determine and you need to know what your CYA is, what your CYA level is, and you need to basically understand. If you understand that if your CYA is 30, 50, or higher, then 97% of your chlorine is going to be bound to the CYA. And there's only 3% that's available active in the pool to kill algae and bacteria and so forth. And so if you take basically a pool at a pH of 7.5, 30 to 60, whatever, you've got CYA in there, 97% of that is bound to the CYA. There's only 3%. And you also know at a pH of 7.5, you're producing only 50% HOCl and 50% of a weaker disinfectant, which is the hypochlorite ion. So if you just take 3 and you divide that in half, that's 1.5%. And you can take your ppm of free chlorine, whatever that is, if it's 2, okay, and you times that 1.5%, that's not going to be, the number you get's not going to be enough of the hypochlorous acid to kill algae. And typically what Bob, if you looked in the class that Bob taught, Bob showed that, even at 30 ppm of CYA, it takes at least 4 ppm of free chlorine to keep algae at bay. So I think that going through Bob's teachings and understanding the importance of maintaining a good level of hypochlorous acid, pH is important for that. So I'm just going to say, number one, if you keep your free chlorine levels above your combines and keep your combines minimized, you're going to have a less chance of algae. So that's probably number one that I would say. The number two thing I would say that we could do in place of sodium bromide, and look, sodium bromide's good, but again, too much of something is not good. And we know too much sodium bromide and you're going to start losing your chlorine and have problems. But there is something you can use in place of sodium bromide, and that's borates. Borates are an algae preventer. And they also reduce your chlorine demand. So I would say, and I probably would have been doing this anyway, as opposed to sodium bromide. To me, sodium bromide was more a Band-Aid than a real long-term preventative. And it had its problems. And obviously now it has even more problems. So borate, I would go with borate. I'd put boric acid in my pools and get them to 50 ppm and keep your free chlorine residual higher than your combines. And I mean, barring that you don't have some old ancient pool that's as rough as, sandpaper or a bad flow, obviously there's physical things like proper circulation and flow. I don't think you'll have algae problems, and managing your CYA, keeping your CYA down.
Yeah, I agree with you on the borates. I've been using them for over a decade now since I discovered them. And actually, Trouble-Free Pools was where I actually first heard about it. They had a lot of articles on that particular product. And, I'm doing a lot of testing with these smart water monitors. This is part of this also. And a lot of them use ORP. oxygen reduction potential. How does that help? Because I know in Europe, ORP is really big. Bob Lowry talked about this many times of why ORP is not coming to America. I mean, the way it is in Europe. Why don't more pool pros use ORP as a way of gauging if the pool is safe to swim in?
Well, I mean, I think that the primary thing is, I mean, ORP is measuring electrical activity of an oxidant in the water. So it's not measuring disinfection. It's not measuring sanitation like a straight chlorine test would. It's measuring the activity of an oxidizer. Now, chlorine is an oxidizer, but what's the primary reason we're putting chlorine in a pool? We're putting it in the pool to sanitize. And oxidation and sanitation are two different things. And I think primarily commercially, ORP is used, and it's used a lot of operators. I mean, obviously, if you have a high amount of oxidation, you have the right level of ORP, you can sort of determine that, okay, that's coming from chlorine. So I have good sanitation too. It's almost kind of an assumption in a sense, and it's two different things. I mean, with ORP is not measuring the killing ability and the level of hypochlorous acid and so forth, and free chlorine that's sanitizing. It's measuring electrical activity by millivolts of an oxidant, and so. What happens when you have cyanuric acid, though, is because the cyanuric acid is holding on to some of the chlorine, that's going to make your ORP level go down because you have less of an oxidant that's active in the pool. And so, when you do a free chlorine test, that free chlorine test is also, as free chlorine, it's picking up the chlorine molecules that are loosely bound to the cyanuric. ORP is not going to do that. So that's why if you have high cyanuric, your ORP levels go down. I guess sort of falsely, somebody could look at that and think, I don't have enough chlorine because my ORP level says it's low. No, your ORP level is basically telling you that there's not oxidative activity happening because 97% of your chlorine is bound to the CYA. And so the ORP is only going to pick up the activity from that 3%, and it's going to look lower with cyanuric acid. But again, when you do a free chlorine test, like a DPD test, that is giving you the true free chlorine level because it's recording the 97% as well as the 3% as free chlorine.
So I was going to say, so you think maybe of course with ORP, you'd have to also do free chlorine testing.
Right.
Just one last thing on this and we'll switch gears. Our era of testing, we use the OTO tester. And that's, I know I go back to that, and a lot of guys use the flash testing with the OTO. Today they use it.
Yeah.
And you're saying
they got the leather holster on their belt.
Yes. That's not an accurate way to test pools now that we know.
No. It's because the thing with OTO is only giving you total. That's all it's giving you. And I teach my water chemistry class, and I say, look, if all you're doing when you're testing your pools, if you're using a test strip or you're just using OTO, and you're just getting a total chlorine reading, then you really don't know what's going on in that pool. The only thing you know about that pool is there's chlorine in that pool, but you have no idea what form that chlorine is in. So you don't know your free chlorine, you don't know your combines, and just like I stated, every time you go to the pool, you need to know those three things. And with the OTO, you can't. It's all it's telling you is you've got total chlorine. It's not telling you how much of that chlorine is in the form of chloramines, which are irritants to swimmers. They're poor disinfectants. And if your combined chlorine levels are higher than your free, Those are the pools you're going to have algae in. You're going to have cloudy pools. You're going to have, people's eyes are going to bother them. They're going to have skin problems, all kinds of things. You're never going to be able to get enough chlorine in that pool to keep that pool up if you have combines that are consistently higher. And an OTO is not going to tell you what's going on. It's just going to tell you this is total chlorine.
Yeah, and for those not familiar with that, that's the 5-way test kit where the reagent makes it turn yellow, which is actually a carcinogen as well.
It's a carcinogen also, which is why it's gotten pulled from a lot of markets in Europe in particular. And yeah, I mean, that's the old, go to Walmart or the hardware store and get a test kit. No, you really don't want it.
And if you want to hear the first part about the kind of the ban on sodium bromide in a way by the EPA, you can tune into that. I'll have the link in the description here of the podcast. And if you are looking for other podcasts, you can find those on my website, swimmingforlearning.com. On the banner, click on the podcast icon. There'll be a drop-down menu of over 1,600 podcasts there for you. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a good rest of your week. God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.